This lecture will focus on the ratification of the Constitution. Just a reminder, the previous lecture covered the Constitutional Convention, where the Founding Fathers came up with a constitution that would divide power between the state and federal government. Not everyone approved of this constitution. The Federalists supported the Constitution. They believe that the name refers to the balance, or their name refers to the balance of power between the states and the national government. Anti-federalists opposed the Constitution. They opposed a strong central government. They felt that we were just creating a similar system that they had just declared freedom from, similar to Parliament and the controls of the English government. They felt that if we gave too much power to the federal government, we would end up in the exact same situation we had just fought the American Revolution over. Federalists were people like George Washington and James Madison. They often came from urban centers, merchants, skilled workers, and laborers who saw the benefit of a national government that could control trade. Also, small states and those with weak economies felt that a strong central government could protect their interests. Anti-federalists were people like Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee. Most anti-federalists came from rural areas. They saw little benefit in a strong government that could add to their tax burden. Think of people like Daniel Shays. They also came from large states and those with strong economies. They had more freedom under the Articles of Confederation. Remember, a lot of the large states had already paid off their debt incurred by the American Revolution, and so a strong government that could control them or even increase their tax burden wasn't something that they felt that they could benefit from. Now, those who were in support of the Constitution, like Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote the Federalist Papers. These were a series of 85 essays defending the Constitution. They appeared in newspapers between October 1787 and April 1788. They provided an analysis and explanation of the Constitution that remains important today, such as separation of power and division of power. These were written anonymously, though everyone pretty much knew who had written them. But they're very important documents because they sort of explain the mindset of the Founding Fathers and what they wrote in the Constitution. And they tried to reassure people about the power of the federal government and how it was limited and how it could be controlled. These documents are still referred to today by lawyers and judges, especially your Supreme Court justices, in making decisions on constitutional law. In contrast to the Federalist Papers, you have letters from a federal farmer. This was written by Richard Henry Lee, a Virginian, who listed the rights of anti-federalists believed should be protected, such as freedom of press and religion, guarantees against unreasonable searches of people in their homes, and the right to trial by jury. Remember, these are protections that English citizens received, but were often taken away by the English government during the time leading up to the American Revolution. Laws like the Quartering Act and the Coercive Acts, laws that took, even the Sugar Act that took away the right for people to have a trial by jury. The Anti-Federalists were very concerned that if we didn't list these protections in the Constitution, then it would give a government the right to take these powers away, similar to what Parliament did to the American colonists in the 1760s and 1770s. Federalists were favored by the newspapers, and you really can't argue with those like George Washington, the president of the convention, and of course the general of the Continental Army, and Ben Franklin, one of our diplomats and a major founding father. But anti-federalists had the power of the Bill of Rights. The Constitution lacked a list of citizens' rights and freedoms. So, there was the suggestion of the Bill of Rights. Federalists insisted that the Constitution granted only limited power to a national government, so it couldn't violate the rights of the states and the people. But Anti-Federalists felt that since the Constitution weakened the states, the people needed a national Bill of Rights to protect them. They wanted written guarantees. So, Federalists promised a Bill of Rights, and the Constitution was on the way to being ratified. June 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution, thus putting it into effect. Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution. New York and Virginia hadn't voted yet, and by being two of the largest states, their ratification was very, very important for the Constitution to have any power, especially since Virginia had so many powerful politicians within it. So Virginia had Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, and James Monroe going up against James Madison, Edmund Randolph, and George Washington. Madison's logic and Washington's influence won the day. James Madison got the nickname the father of our Constitution because of the meticulous notes he took at the Constitutional Convention, and also his logic in explaining the Constitution both through the Federalist Papers and the process of Virginia ratification. It was approved by 10 votes in June 1788. In New York, John Jay and Alexander Hamilton were going up against an anti-federalist majority, but the Federalist Papers and news of ratification by New Hampshire and Virginia swayed the crowd, and it was narrowly approved by only 3 votes. Now that the Constitution has been ratified, James Madison took on the task of creating the Bill of Rights. He studied 80 proposed amendments from state ratifying conventions. In September 1789, Congress submitted 12 to the state legislatures for ratification. On December 1791, the required 3/4 of states ratified the 10 amendments, and those became the Bill of Rights. Protections like freedom of the press, freedom of religion in the First Amendment, to right to bear arms in the Second, things like protecting against quartering in peacetime, or the right to trial by jury, the right to a fair trial, to protections reserved to the states and people, are all listed in the Bill of Rights. This is the end of the ratification. Now that the Constitution has been ratified, now the country needs to elect a president, which will, of course, the first one will be George Washington, and they have to get underway in being a nation. But that's not going to be an easy task for the Founding Fathers to deal with. So now we'll see how people like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and John Adams deal with this new nation and the challenges that will come.